Hello. I hope you are having a wonderful day. Uh, so, I am cancer free, 170 days. Last week, I took 79,739 steps. I ate more than 25 pounds of fruits and vegetables, and I am excited for another week. Had a good week this week, and I'm going to have a good week next week. As far as general cancer updates, I had an MRI last night. We'll see when the results come back on that. It'll probably be several days, and I'll have to decide if I'm going to wait to talk to an oncologist to find out, or if I'm going to actually go read the report myself. I'm kind of thinking I'm going to read the report myself. I want to see what the if that one lymph node is growing or shrinking or what. I've heard, and I don't know if this is always true, but I've heard that CT scans, sometimes their precision isn't, we're talking about millimeters. They can misdiagnose the precision sometimes. And I think MRIs potentially are more precise. I know in the case of my cancer, I had a CT first. They couldn't see anything, but then they wanted to do an MRI because of the location. They wanted to get the precise location of the cancer. So my hope is that the MRI actually will give a better picture, and hopefully will be nothing to worry about. So we'll see. Something I'm grateful for this week is Magna-Tiles. So if you have ever had Magna-Tiles, or even know what they are, they're these little blocks, little plastic blocks, and they have magnets around the edges, and you can slap them together and build stuff. So we got Magna-Tiles for Lexi back when she was like 2, and she just didn't really play with them much, didn't care for them all that much, and they kind of just sat in a box. And then when we went to Memphis, we got another set just because we were trying to get something for them to do, and they started playing with them there. And then when we got back, they combined them, so then they have a big box of them now. And now basically every day they go into the playroom and just like slap together a tower. And I think it's really cool because they're able to be really creative and want to give them something to do. And they get to work those creative muscles of building and interacting and everything, which is something I'm grateful for. Now, the downside, of course, is now they have these awesome towers that are just prime targets to be destroyed, and then they lose their minds and go after each other. So that does happen. Maybe it used to happen in seems like every day. Now it's like once a week, or someone will knock down the tower and they yell and scream at each other. But it's worth it just to have it. All right. So the topic for this week is, what is cancer? I thought it would be something, obviously it's pretty relevant to me, but I know that before Luke, I never really understood what cancer was. I didn't really understand the different kinds. I didn't understand the staging. I didn't really get any of it. I just knew that it was bad. So I wanted to do do a video about what I've learned about it. And this by no means is comprehensive or will tell you anything about a very specific thing about a cancer that maybe you're interacting with. But as a general understanding of cancer, it'll help get you understand some of the terminology and how it works and what is scary and what is not scary about it. So, disclaimer, not a doctor. Cancer is incredibly complex. And if you have cancer or know someone has cancer, do not rely on any of this. Seek medical professional expertise and make sure that you're listening to them. But if you just want an understanding or some thoughts. This could be a good little segment. All right, so I'll talk a little bit about my experience. So Luke, my son, for those of you who don't know, was born with a B core sarcoma last year. This is like, whenever you hear of cancer with babies, it's always a rare cancer. But that's because babies don't get cancer, right? There are common cancers in babies, and they're extremely rare actual cancers. So when my son was born, they had diagnosed him with neuroblastoma. And when we read about it, like, it's incredibly rare, cancer never happens. Well, it's actually like one of the most common baby cancers, actually. It's just babies don't get cancer. So that's what we actually thought it was. And as we did a bunch of tests and biopsies and things, we actually felt pretty good about their ability to treat it because it actually was a common baby cancer. But it turns out it wasn't that. His cancer was B core sarcoma. I think there's actually some slightly different letters. They have really complicated diagnoses, but sarcomas are much harder to treat and to get rid of. And ultimately, this particular strain, they only had, I think, 3, maybe 4 documented cases before Luke in a baby ever. So we're talking next level rare. And because of that, we got to we went to St. Jude, and we managed to have hope the entire time until he did get killed by his cancer. But that is an incredibly rare cancer. By the statistics, they're not 100% perfect, but it's about a 1 in a billion chance. Maybe a little bit better, maybe a little bit worse than that. Better, yeah, because there's probably some cases of it that have never been documented. But we got 7 billion people. It's only happened 4 times. It's actually probably about 1 in a billion. So that's just like an insane thing that had happened to me, right? Well, then I got diagnosed with cancer at 33, and I had colon cancer. And for a 33-year-old, so some statistics around colon cancer. Colon cancer, for whatever reason, hates men. And statistically speaking, over the course of a man's lifetime, if you go all the way till you're old, you have about a 1 in 23 chance of getting colon cancer. So it's actually like incredibly common. But for someone my age, it is not. So at 33, I had, let's see, what was it? 0.0038% chance, give or take, of getting colon cancer. So it's actually, it's not as rare as you might think. I think it's like 4 in 100,000 or something like that. But it is not common. So I think the point of that is you always think that it'll happen to someone else. I know I did. I'd always be like, well, statistically speaking, if I do this, play the odds, I'm going to be fine, right? Well, clearly the odds don't love me. Statistically speaking, neither of these things should have happened to us, but definitely not both things happening to us. Like the odds of having a kid that had 1 in a billion cancer and then you getting cancer, like doubles the odds. It should just not happen, but it did. And it happens to people all the time. In my experience of knowing people who have had cancer, I had 2 before all this. And then after that, now I've known a lot more people who have had cancer. But before this, there were 2. And one was a little girl who had leukemia, and she passed away. And then the other was a coworker. He was maybe in his 50s, and he had stage 4 colon cancer, and he died. So when these diagnoses were put down on us, my stance was, we're fighting for our lives, right? And in the case of Luke, we absolutely were. In the case of me, obviously, I'm taking some pretty drastic action with my lifestyle. I'm taking it very seriously, even though my staging was not, a stage 4. And I'll talk a little bit about staging to explain what that means. But it can be a very scary thing, and it really makes you think about life and what's really important. It's absolutely changed my life, all of it. I think for the better, as crazy as that sounds. I definitely have different perspectives of what's important and what's not. All right, so let's talk a little bit about cancer causes. So when you have cancer, especially if you're young, they're going to say, well, that shouldn't happen. You're young. Cancer happens to old people. Let's get you genetically tested. And so they'll have genetic testing. And I had genetic testing. Luke had genetic testing. In both cases, the cancer was not genetic. It was just something that happened. And that seems to be the main pointer that they look to when you are young to determine if you have, or like why you have the cancer. And then after that, they're like, well, we don't really know why you have cancer, but let's do chemo or let's do surgery. And the reality is genetically caused cancer is incredibly rare. Like that, if you don't hold me to this, but the research I've done says 5 to 10% of cancers, and that's basically what they've said to me as well, are genetically caused. So the odds are, genetically speaking, back to odds, that's not why you have cancer or why someone gets cancer. But it's the first thing they check. And to be clear, they should, because if you know that gives you some understanding of the cancer and it might impact the treatments and whatnot. But what's interesting is they don't have a lot of knowledge of why you have the cancer. They aren't very good at telling you, well, this is why. In the case of Luke, they never could say why, other than he had a genetic mutation during his development, which did happen, obviously, and he got cancer. And that's probably the logical. In his case, I think that's a pretty logical explanation. Like it was just something went wrong as he was being developed. And that happens. I mean, babies have other issues besides cancer, sometimes developmentally, and they're just not as terminal. So that's a logical explanation. And then in the case of adults, like young people like me, my oncologist said, I don't really know why. We'll probably never know. And that's kind of a weird thing to say, because cancer ultimately is widely understood to be increasing the risk of cancer can be happening by doing things, and your environment increases your risk of cancer. So while you might not say, okay, you drank a lot and you sat on your butt all the time and you ate chicken strips and processed food all the time, that probably had a contributing factor to your cancer. You might say that caused it. You might not be able to say that definitively, but you might be able to say, hey, these are things that your lifestyle, your environment likely played a contributing factor. We can't explain it. But typically, and in my case, no one has said that. I've come to that realization on my own. But just know, in some situations, I think cancer is just your body just lost its mind and decided to give you cancer. That's the case of Luke. In other cases, you're a little unlucky, but you contributed to it, right? If you smoked every day for 10 years at one point in your life, I mean, that is probably the reason why you have lung cancer, right? Or, if you've been sitting on your butt for 70 years, that's probably the reason why you have whatever cancer you have, right? Like there's things that add up over time. And I think the new contributing factor is all the chemicals we put in our bodies, right? Those are new in our environment. And I think that is one of the main reasons why we're seeing a lot more younger people with cancer, is the chemicals. So obviously, if you've been watching me, you know that that's kind of not my MO anymore. All right, let's talk a little bit about treatments. So if you have cancer, generally speaking, there's two treatments available to you. One is surgery, which is what I had, and the other is chemo. Chemo, you hear about it. It's just as bad as it's always been. In the case of colon cancer, which is what I have, the third most popular cancer to kill somebody, and cancer is the number 2 cause of death in the United States, you would think that they would have really good solutions. And they do. I mean, surgery actually is, in many cases, curative. And so in this case, I obviously had surgery. I am hoping and praying that cured me. And since I was an early stage, once again, statistically, I should be in the green. But clearly, statistics have not played in my favor, so I can't really count on that. But when I talked to an oncologist before we knew the staging, and I asked, well, what kind of treatment would it be if we were going to treat? It's the FOLFOX or FU chemo cocktail, which involves 3 chemos. And I'll mention chemo in a second, but 3 chemos that have basically been developed in the 50s and 70s. And chemo was invented or discovered in the 40s. So what we're saying here is we have the oldest treatment option that has not been good at curing people, and that is our solution. My friend had stage 4 colon cancer. I don't know if he did chemo or not, but if he did, it didn't matter because he died. Most people that get colon cancer stage 4, they die, almost all of them. And they all get treated with chemo. So it doesn't really work, right? It doesn't work at curing, but that's the only solution that they have. I'll talk real quick about chemo. Chemo is a kind of a broad term, and there's a variety of drugs that fall into the realm of chemo. There are other therapies that exist, but the main, I guess, maybe definition causer of it being a chemo drug versus not a chemo drug is the way it works. So what chemos do is they target rapidly producing cells, which is what cancer does, is it just keeps growing. And chemo goes and makes the body stop rapidly producing cells. And the idea is the cancer stops rapidly producing cells and it dies. The downside is it stops it in the whole body. So if you, your blood cells and your fingernails and your hair and bunches of vital processes in your body get impacted by chemo in addition to the cancer. And basically the idea is that's okay. Those won't kill you. Cancer will. If we're lucky, the cancer dies and then you can recover and you're okay. Every now and then that does happen, right? It does happen and it does work. But in a lot of cases, the cancer shrinks for a little bit, but it doesn't die. And then it comes back, often even more aggressive than before. And that could be because your body has been so immune compromised by the chemo itself that your body is now more susceptible to the cancer. So chemotherapy is pretty scary and really should be the absolute last resort, in my opinion. There are some other technologies that do exist that are a little bit more cutting edge, but they have their own set of issues too. So one is immunotherapy. That's kind of the newest and greatest tool, and honestly, it's the one I'm most excited about. Um, Basically, what that does is they can genetically create CAR T therapy, genetically engineered cells that tell your immune system, go kill this cancer. They're not very good at it. So, in most cases, it kills a bunch of other things too. But if it is properly targeted at your cancer, there are scenarios where it literally cures you, right? Like it straight up kills the cancer. It's gone. You might have side effects, like you might get diabetes because you did it, but you might be alive. I kind of think that immunotherapy or therapies like that are going to be the future. It's the kind of that next generation therapy. And those are the ones I'm more excited for. Now, obviously, it'd be great if we could get an actual therapy that doesn't kill the rest of the body on the way, but it's at least a step in the right direction in my head. However, one of the things I found out is those therapies are normally not allowed as the first attempt of therapies. And that could be because they do have side effects as well. And they tend to be more good at targeted, very specific cancers, like versus just general cancers. But often they require you to do chemo before you can even do these therapies, like insurance does, which is ridiculous, in my humble opinion. There is also a couple other targeted therapies. I think there's one for breast cancer and then one through leukemia. So some of these targeted therapies, they're kind of like what you think of when we think of, oh, we've got like next generation therapies, and they do exist, but they tend to exist for only certain cancers. So if you don't happen to have those cancers, those therapies aren't even good options for you, and you're just stuck with chemo. They do have a couple other cool features that are kind of new. One is like liquid biopsies, where they can detect cancer in your body with a blood test. So I have a blood test on my stand. I'm going to take it Wednesday, I think. That I was going to check to see if the cancer showed up in my body somewhere else, which is a lot less invasive. It's still miles away from what it should be. And when we think of like, oh, we've really got this technically advanced stuff, it's not what it could be, or what we'd hope it would be, but we're headed in the right direction. So anyway, I know that's a little bit negative opinion on the therapies, but I think the good news is we are closer than we've ever been to getting actual targeted therapies, but we aren't actually there yet in most cases. If you live another 10 to 20 years, you might live in a world where you can just take a drug and your cancer goes away and you're fine. I hope so. But right now, we're still living on pretty primitive therapies like chemo. That is kind of just a hope and a prayer. It's like shooting a shotgun at a person to kill a targeted little item, right? You might get lucky and a bullet might hit it and it ends it and you're cured. But in the case of, statistically speaking, most people who do chemo, they don't make it. They die. Granted, these are old people, so the whole goal for them is to just live a little longer. But for someone like me, living a little longer, 5 years is not enough, right? So I think we're changing our perspective a little bit, especially as we're dying, as more and more people are being impacted younger, that we need better therapies and we need them sooner. But the drug corporation machine is moving slowly. And there's reasons for that. Like you you don't mess with this stuff, but at the same time, what we have needs to get better. It needs to get better fast. Okay. Cancer staging. So you've heard of different, he had stage 1, he had stage 2. You think stage 1's good, right? There's even a stage 0. What does it mean? Well, the reality is cancer is different for everybody. And the staging means different things based on the cancer and different things. I'm most familiar with solid tumor cancers because that's what Luke had, and that's technically what a colon cancer is. So it might be a little bit different if you have like a leukemia or blood cancer, bone cancer, some of these other cancers that are not that way. But I'll talk about it in general terms that I think are relatively true for all cancers and give you an idea. So first off, stage 0 just means like this could become cancer. Like I think a polyp that isn't cancerous is actually stage 0. It's not concerning at all, is what it boils down to. People might freak out because they say, because they hear the word cancer and they have connotations of, stage 4. But really, stage 0 is just like your body, someone just saw something that was a little bit weird, basically. Stage 1, that is actually cancerous, right? Like you've got a polyp in your colon and they lop it off and they go send it to the lab and, yep, that's a cancerous polyp, but it's gone. So technically at this point, you don't have cancer, but it's concerning in the sense that your body is capable of growing cancer because you had a polyp that had cancer. Stage 2, which is what I had, is when it's not just like a little self-contained cancer all by itself. It's actually grown into an organ. So in my case, my cancer probably started as a polyp in my intestine, and then it grew into the intestine wall and grew all the way through it. So that is stage 2. Now it's still self-contained. It's still just right there. It hasn't really done anything. And once you remove it surgically, realistically, it's the same thing as if I lopped a polyp off, right? Because it's gone. The key is with stage 2 is, as far as we know, it hasn't spread anywhere. Now, it's obviously bigger than it would have been. So there's a chance that we just don't know and it's actually done something else. And that's why it's still, a higher stage. But these stage 1 and stage 2 cancers, surgery is an excellent treatment option because you get it out and it's gone. Now, it does mean your body grew cancer, right? And you're capable of growing it again, but the cancer itself is gone. Now, stage 3, this one's a little bit interesting because the definition typically just means you've got a big tumor or you've got, the main source of your cancer. And then you see it in a lymph node that's nearby. And the amount of lymph nodes that are impacted actually is incredibly important. If you've had one lymph node, that's concerning, but it's not that bad, right? We have 5, 6 lymph nodes. That is very concerning. Basically, I did some research because I was just trying to understand before I knew my staging what the impact of lymph nodes would be. And the research that I did, and it was just one study, so it's not 100%, but it is generally indicated, and we talk to them, more lymph nodes is bad. But you had I believe it was a 23% chance of having cancer come back after surgery per lymph node impacted. So if you have 5 lymph nodes, you're almost guaranteed for the cancer to come back, even if you've removed it surgically, right? And that's why in stage 3, they normally recommend that you do chemo in addition to surgery because they know that their odds are very high that the cancer is still there. And then stage 4 is the same as stage 3 in most cases, meaning you've got a lymph node impacted and you've got another tumor growing somewhere else. I think the definition is distant, but distance is really relative, right? So, if I've got a colon cancer right here and then I've got it 5 inches away, I think that's still considered distant, and that's stage 4. But you could also have distant and it's actually in my liver or in my kidneys or in my, lungs. And that's even farther distant, but that's potentially worse, right? Like if it's grown into another organ, that's a lot worse than it's just grown a little bit away. But they're both considered stage 4. So there's a lot of nuance in every situation. Obviously, the farther down the stages are, that means your body has been growing it longer and is capable of growing it. And the thing about cancer is it's actually not detectable when it is just growing. Like right now, we can't detect it when it's just there. And that's actually probably a good thing in a way, because if we could detect the cancer that is, couple cells, we would be diagnosing everyone with cancer, because we all have like little bad cells all the time and our body gets rid of them. We clear them out, we toss them, and the cancer never grows. But, that like, okay, it got to 100 million cells of cancer, is getting out of hand, let's go after it. Like we can't detect that. We can't really detect it until one, it's visible on a CT or an MRI, which by then it's pretty big. That's where the blood test option, if we can get really good at it, could be an amazing screening option. But right now, the blood test screenings are only good for screening the cancer that you already had. So like in my case, they pulled the tumor out. They were able to get the genetic profile of it and say, okay, now we can go see if you got that again. But they don't have a way to just generally see if I have cancer. So what do you do, right? Like, this is all scary stuff. And cancer it's the number 2 cause of death in the United States, right? It happens a lot. If you're a man, you have an incredibly high chance of getting colon cancer before you die. It might be what kills you. That's acceptable for society when most people who are getting it are 70, right? They're like, well, you're going to die from something, so why not colon cancer? Well, what if colon cancer didn't kill you and you lived to 100? Like, you don't have to die at 70. But I guess we decide it's okay. So anyway, that leads me to, well, what do you do, right? The reality is the medical team have been working on this since Reagan. We have not cured it. We have made advancements, but what we have is a lot of very expensive, very toxic drugs that only kind of work. And in some situations, that's the right thing to do. But the challenge, and what I have taken on, is, well, okay, I had it. It's now removed. I say I'm cancer free. Let's make my body a place where cancer can't grow, right? And I don't know why the medical community isn't encouraging that. Like there's a no downside to it in my head, right? Worst case scenario, you get in the best shape, feel the best you've ever had, and then you die because the cancer's still there, right? You still go out on top. Just do it. And then best case scenario, the fact that you do all that makes your body a place where cancer can't thrive and it doesn't grow or it dies. There are some cancer medical people who do really take nutrition into account. And, but by and large, that is not their primary or even something that they legit talk about. Like I talked to my oncologist and I was like, hey, I'm changing my lifestyle. I want to be really cautious on my treatment. He's like, you can do whatever you want, but just so you know, that won't make a difference, right? Like he straight up told me that. I don't believe that's true. There's lots of evidence that indicates that lifestyle does make a huge difference. We know that because we know if you do certain things with your lifestyle, that reduces your chance of these things happening. Like we will say that in one breath, But at the same time, say if you have cancer, it doesn't make a difference. It doesn't add up in my head. So what I am doing personally is making my body a place where cancer doesn't thrive. That means I'm changing my lifestyle, right? I eat differently, I act differently, I do lots of different stuff. That has led to me feeling great a lot. Once again, no downside. So my recommendation to you is don't play the stat game like I did. Take action now when you don't have to, and you'll never have to. Side bonus, the number 1 and the number 2 cause of death are also highly impacted by lifestyle change. So even if cancer doesn't get you, heart disease might, or diabetes might. If you make lifestyle changes now, you can avoid all 3 and live your best life before you die. Because we are all going to die. All right, so I know that was a lot. Hopefully it was informative. I want to reiterate, cancer is not something to mess around with. If you or someone you know has cancer, you definitely need medical assistance as well. But lifestyle can play a part, and I think it is an important consideration. And my channel is here to help you be inspired to do something with your life and to just be encouraged, right? To fight the good fight the best you can. Okay. So for this week, something worth remembering. The kids, I was giving them a bath or whatever, and they started playing with my hair. And it was just kind of fun or whatever. And then they got out and they got their comb and their brush and they got all excited and they had me sit down and then they did my hair for like 10, 15 minutes. And it was really cute. It was painful because Levi would like scrape the comb on my head and then Lexi would pull the brush really hard. But it was fun and they love playing with hair. Levi in particular, I think he could be a hairstylist. But then they started doing it like every day this week. So it was a cute moment, something to remember. And yeah. All right. Hot take for the week. Don't time the market, but also don't freak out. So if you've been following the market and, maybe hopefully you're not, it's been down, but it's also coming back up. The reality is the market has only always gone up. This is one where statistics is actually incredibly consistent. If you get in the market and stay in the market, it will go up. So if you're freaking out, who cares? Keep investing. It will be back later. The best thing to do is to just invest early and often when you're young and let time do its thing. This is where consistency pays off. Whatever you do not get out of the market when the market is down. That is the absolute worst thing to do. If you're like, oh crap, the market's going down, let me sell and cut my losses. If that is your mindset, you should have never been in the market to start with, because that is how you lose all your money. What you have to do is you just got to wait and it'll come back and then you sell, right? Because it always comes back. Now, it could take a year or two, but it does always come back. All right. Well, this is a long video. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. I am going to be introducing some more videos to my YouTube channel. I've also started a Facebook and Instagram and TikTok. So if you don't really use YouTube very often and you use these other platforms, you can subscribe to me or follow me on those platforms. On my YouTube, there is a link to those other ones. I haven't really started posting much yet, but I'm going to start posting, and I'm going to kind of kick it off by posting Luke's story, which is just going to kind of set the timeline for everything that kind of reset my life, and just kind of tell you if you happen to have been, I had a local group where I was posting it. You got the behind the scenes look, but if you haven't, just walk us through the story of Luke and then me finding out I had cancer and just kind of everything that happened last year. And then I'll eventually get to the point where I'm just posting new regular stuff. But that's coming over the next days and months. So if you're interested, follow along. Otherwise, God bless. Have a wonderful week, and we'll see you next time.